Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. I've heard people claim that playing with someone at the D&D table is a great way to get a sense of their true nature. I kinda get where those people are coming from because it does allow people to act out power fantasies they may have had in real life without the fear of consequences. Ultimately though, I don't assume that every murder hobo I have at the table is someone who wants to be a serial killer in real life, but just lacks the capacity. One of the few things though that I do think is a self-report is if someone, when given a small amount of power at the game table, becomes an absolute tyrant overnight. There is a second thing that seems to happen a lot on this channel, and that's the fact that many people treat in-game romance as a way to pursue dating in real life. Misunderstandings can happen at the game table, which is why I always say to communicate your intentions. Trust me when I say that sometimes one person can think their character is just role-playing with a reoccurring NPC that they really like plot-wise, and the other person thinks that you've had a crush on them for the last 3 months because you keep flirting with their NPC they consider a self-insert. Today's treasure goes by the name That Guy Destroys a Plot because he wanted to play with his crush. First time poster on this sub, sorry if the story is too wordy. I've been inspired by Den of the Drake and Crick Crab to make this story based on a That Guy our group played with. Names have been changed of course. When talking about problem players, it's important to distinguish that a shitty player can be a good friend, and a good player can be a shitty friend. However, with Joseph, it was clear that he was both a bad player and a bad friend. I met Joseph on a Discord server running a homebrew setting using Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Most activities and games were small sessions connected by the same setting and characters with different DMs. I had formed a small group of friends and we often hung around. One player in our group, Taylor, had joined at the same time as Joseph and as such formed a sort of bond together. When Joseph's character died, it created a shift in Taylor's character and caused the start of a still ongoing character arc for Taylor, going over 2 or so years now. Joseph began to slowly hang around our group more often, something we didn't mind at first. They talked about the game and showed interest in the same things, but soon enough Joseph would start to show his first red flags. Though in the moment we would take this as minor inconveniences or, oh, that's just Joseph. He rarely played with us as a character after his first character's death, mostly sticking to being a DM on our server. Joseph dominated voice chats with talks about his other hobbies, his life, his thoughts on the game, his thoughts on the setting, and generally anything. If he thought it, he said it, and he let us know. We could get him to stop talking over others after a gentle reminder, yet this behavior was something he continued up until the last time I talked with him. If he wasn't talking over someone else, he would frequently complain about the system we use. He was a diehard 3.5 edition fan, and would constantly rules lawyer or argue the flaws of 5th edition. Now I agree that the system has its flaws, but none of us seemed to care or agree with him, which made it all the more aggravating when we wanted to talk about something else, yet he kept trying to talk about 3.5. There was also a player, Raven, whom I had a crush on, whilst Joseph also had a crush on her. It led to an awkward, out-of-character situation with Joseph feeding me information that eventually led to the relationship between Raven and I dissolving. The messy drama eventually resolved into all of us deciding to remain mutual friends though, thankfully. Yet Joseph still exhibited simp-like behavior, and for a while the debacle was a sore spot for me. Raven seemed to take things in stride and tried not to make things awkward for us. There's a lot more I can say about Joseph. At times he was a close friend and a confidant. The next he was running over to your crush and telling them that, "I'm so glad that you two are in a relationship." Some notable moments include, he openly had NPCs flirt with player characters despite the player's wishes or comfort. His games had bizarre rulings that he listed in a Google Doc that he would edit mid-session to cement his authority as DM and keep track of his rulings. Joseph coming into calls drunk or high just to tell us how much we meant to him, something that felt very contradictory to the things he did while sober. I guess that's nice at least. He created a foil to my character by taking everything that made her a character and trying to invert it, and only ending up being extremely inflammatory and offensive, and he constantly explained out of character concepts to us, bringing the in-character action and intrigue to a grinding halt. The author here will continue and talk about the final straw, but these these things alone are pretty annoying and disruptive. I guess it's good to have an ongoing Google Doc, obviously, for your bizarre rulings. Having the DM hate the system that you're using, constantly complain about it, and then trying to homebrew things to kind of work backwards into 3.5 is definitely annoying. It's one of those things where actually I'm totally okay with the DM saying, look guys, if I'm gonna DM, I want to use my system, otherwise I'm not gonna do it. And then you as the party have to decide if it's worth it. Because ultimately, if you say no, and he can't find anyone that wants to play 3.5, he'll have to cave and eventually go back to 5th edition anyways. And if that ends the campaign, that sucks. I mean, on the server, it seems like there's plenty of people willing to DM 5th edition. It is really frustrating when the DM is the person that tends to go off topic and goes on rants about a system they're currently playing. But even worse though, ignoring all that, having NPCs constantly flirt with player characters, especially one that they have a crush on in real life, despite the player's wishes or comfort, is usually a deal breaker for me. When it comes to romance at the game table, I'm usually a fade to black, or even better, just keep it at a minimum kind of person. I get that there's cool story arcs that can probably come out of it. I just usually choose to pursue different story beats, and it's not a focus of how I run my characters or my NPCs. It really does matter on the table though. Let's see what that final straw is. Yet the situation I tell today is perhaps the last straw many people in our friend group had with him. We were playing in a session set on a small island cursed by foreign magic that made our magic items stop working. It was a fun plot for intrigue, exploration, and roleplay. We had a few players who had originally come from this island and wanted to learn more about this land to break its curse and tame its wild, wacky magic. Raven was one of these players, and she was very into the story that was presented as well as her character. But none of us ever got to resolve the plot after the stunt Joseph pulled. Raven coordinated with the Dungeon Master to run a session with the express purpose of exploring the history of this magical island. As Raven's character and ours were friendly, we lent our aid and we followed her on this expedition to discover more about her land's history. When Joseph heard that Raven was leading an expedition in character, Joseph made a character quickly before the session so he could tag along with us, and more importantly, Raven. If we had any complaints with him joining, that did not matter. Joseph's character was a fighter or a wizard or something. I honestly can't remember, it's been like a year and a half, that was designed to be the Mandalorian. Yeah. In this roleplay and exploration heavy session, he wanted to play a bounty hunter that was ripped from the screen of a TV show. The session went bad. Joseph constantly tried to wrestle control of the group from Raven, which led to her becoming notably stressed and irritated with him, which made him mope and pout since he had hurt her feelings. Raven would have been much more open to his suggestions for leading the party if he had understood why they were undertaking this adventure, and why we were following Raven's lead. Yeah, because she was a local. In combat, he was very headstrong and pedantic on his turn. He tried to help us on our turns and frequently tried to correct the Dungeon Master on obscure rules regarding his homebrew monsters. During out-of-character planning and discussion, he constantly brought up Star Wars and his new character, which interrupted us and the Dungeon Master. The final straw came with the temple. It was a small pyramid-like structure that we solved a small puzzle to get into. Inside was a square room with the walls covered in engraved gold. The gold was engraved with the history and lore of the island, a solid clue in our first big lead on the history of this island. As we were exploring the room and a few smaller side rooms, Joseph was quiet. Then after a while of us role-playing and collecting artifacts for study, Joseph spoke up. Joseph, so these walls are made of gold, right? DM, yes, finely engraved gold with the depictions of Joseph. Well, I did the math. Based on the perimeter of the room, this gold should be more than enough for my character to retire. I want to start peeling the gold off the wall. We sat quiet for a moment as that sunk in. Joseph laughed at his declared action. Not malicious or creepy-like, but a laugh that implied he thought the situation was humorous to him, as though he had just beaten the DM at his own game. Raven was the first to object, trying to explain how that absolutely defeated the point of the session and the point of the expedition. The other players tried to talk him down, stating we would not take kindly to such an action against our in-character friend when it came from a stranger we met just moments ago. When all was said and done, the DM confirmed with Joseph that he still wanted to do this, which of course he did. So the DM tried his best, asking Joseph to roll a stealth or sleight of hand check to start clipping off the gold. If you're ever in a situation where your party has has just finished yelling at you for your idea, and the dungeon master then says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" You have to be really confident this is a good idea, because otherwise there's a really good chance either the DM or the party are about to smite you. By the time one of us in character noticed this, he had already taken about a foot of the wall off. Our characters rightfully told him to stop and to get lost, that he was defacing an ancient site. He responded out of character by saying this was the fastest way for his character to retire, and that's what Mando would do. He then acted surprised we had turned hostile, since we apparently didn't warn him that we were against this sabotaging action. We ended the session shortly after, and we left the voice chat with Joseph. It was wrong looking back to leave them alone and give him the cold shoulder, yet at the moment we did not want to deal with his behavior. We never really figured out what exactly the monument was for or what the history of the island was. Enthusiasm for the plot died almost overnight. We kept some of the characters around and had a good time without Joseph's character, and we still play together to this day. I apologize that this was really long, but the more I began writing, the more I began to remember little things that made Joseph so toxic. Thank you for reading. This post gave me a good bit of catharsis to write after so long. Honestly, I don't think this story was long at all. If anything, I feel like it's missing some context. And also, I'm super sad whenever I see a story that seems to have a really interesting setup, and because one player was annoying in a session, they never resolved that plot line. It's like it's so sour they don't even want to humor it in a future session, even without him. But yeah, I'm just dumbfounded. Why would Mando do that? So like, he made a character, he had to make it quickly, so he just made it something he saw from pop culture. I get that. But if the goal is to spend more time with Raven because you're normally DMing for her, but now they're clearly playing for someone else and you want to be part of that campaign, retiring your character doesn't help you here, because now you have to roll a new character and quickly pick, like, I don't know, another pop culture character, like maybe you want to be Thor or Goku next time, and the process starts all over again. If there was any role playing or good moments that your character shared in that session, it's now dead because, you know, Mando had to get that quick buck and retire off into a different island that isn't this island. It does seem like even though you paint him as a simp, he's honestly more of a loot goblin, because that gold was way more important than the girl. On paper, I do like the idea of the multi-DM server, but I feel like it causes so many problems. This one actually has a great example where it seems like Joseph had homebrewed a monster, it got added to the canon of the setting, so when this other DM tried to use it, Joseph felt like he could correct him because he's like, oh, this is the one I made for the setting, therefore I'm the authority. It's like, sorry buddy, you're not the DM right now. Maybe he made a variant that's slightly different. What he says for the moment goes, even if it's your homebrewed monster. Now, of course, we don't know exactly how he like misused the monster. Maybe he just genuinely read something wrong off the stat block that was made. But even so, I'm sorry, Joseph, you just kind of have to roll with it. Talk about it with him after the fact, saying like, look, as a DM, I made this monster to do this task. Here's what I would have done differently. But to correct him in the moment, it's just another way that he derailed the story. I do get that the DM player dynamic is a little bit of give and take, right? Because if the DM does stuff that no one likes, they're not going to come to the next session. And if the players completely run over the DM might get burnt out. He doesn't want to play anymore because he doesn't feel like he's in control at all. So obviously there's a balancing act, but clearly Joseph has done this for things that aren't his homebrewed monster. So I can't blame the multi-DM server thing entirely, because he probably would have done it even with stuff in the monster manual. So homebrew or not, I'm sure he would have been annoying. I am really curious what you guys thought about this story. It does seem like Joseph does a little bit of everything, but there's not a ton of specific details. I mean, don't get me wrong, what I hear is annoying. I'm not a fan of it, but to some of the bullet points earlier on, I would have wanted more specific examples so I could give some advice on what to do better in the future. A bit of a shorter and sweeter video today. I'm gonna have a longer one for the next one, I think. As always, make sure to like and hype the video as it really helps the channel grow, and subscribe if you aren't a member already. I feel like we're finally back into the swing of things. As always, I really hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now. Hey kid, want to try some gamer subs? You can now get free samples anywhere in the world and try the most delicious 0-calorie energy powder in the game when you use code LootGoblin. Each sample sent out gets me one step closer to my quest to get a flavor that tastes suspiciously like Dr. Pepper. If you end up liking those free samples and want to purchase some gamer subs, make sure to use the link in the description or use my code to get 10% off your entire order.